Objectives for today. By the end of class, you should be able to describe the types of images produced by all three types of mirrors and both types of lenses. You should be able to explain how your eye allows you to see, and you should be able to describe where objects get their color from. We're going to start with mirrors. Mirrors are reflective surfaces that form images by regular reflection. So if you remember when we talked about the two types of reflection, regular was the only one that produced an image. So any object that is doing that is considered a mirror. Okay. And there are three different types. The first type is the one you're probably the most familiar with, and that is a plane mirror. A plane mirror has a flat reflecting surface. Okay, so it's smooth, it does not curve. And as a result, the image in the mirror is almost exactly like a photograph, the only difference being it will be reversed left to right. The size of the image is going to depend on how far it is from the mirror. So if you want the image of the object to look bigger, you have to bring it closer. If you want the image to look smaller, you have to move it farther away. The next type of mirror is a concave mirror. So they have a reflecting surface that curves inward. You can imagine this, right? So if the mirror is curving like this side here in the center, that's going to be the side that's reflective. Okay? So it curves inward. Lines that are parallel to the optical axis are reflected through one point, which is called the focal point. So if we go back to that image, okay, you can see that if this is the optical axis, then any light that's parallel to it is getting reflected, and it's going to get reflected through the same point right here. That point would be called the focal point. The distance between the focal point and the mirror is going to be called the focal length. So, you've got your mirror, you've got your focal point. This distance right here is the focal length. And the focal length is important because it will help you tell what kind of image you're going to get. So if the object you're trying to get an image of is more than one focal length away from the mirror, then that image is going to appear upside down in the mirror. If it is closer than one focal length, then the image will be right side up. And if you happen to put the object exactly at the focal point, then no image will appear in the mirror. The next type of mirror is a convex mirror. So this is a mirror where the reflecting surface curves outward. So we could draw it like this and say that this surface is the reflecting surface. So if we were drawing the same mirror from before, right, where we drew the concave one, we said this was the reflecting surface. But if we pointed at this side and said it was the reflecting surface, then it would be convex. So whatever side of this object is reflecting curves out in a convex and curves in a concave. The way I like to remember that is that concave curves inwards like a cave. So concave in like a cave. Images formed by these are always right side up, and they are always smaller than the actual object. So you may have seen a convex mirror, say, in a gas station or on the mirrors of large trucks, where they have those sort of bulb-shaped mirrors. And they're nice because they give you a wider field of view, but they also distort the size of objects, so you have to remember that those objects look smaller and therefore farther away than they actually are. Speaking of focus, let's talk about lenses. Lenses focus light, okay? They're transparent objects that are curved on at least one side that cause light to change direction, okay? So with mirrors, we had 3 types because we had one type that was just a straight flat mirror. But with lenses, that's not possible because in order to be a lens, you have to have at least one side that's curved. So there are only 2 types of lenses. The more the lens curves, the more the light will change the direction and the more distorted the image will appear. The 2 types of lenses are convex lenses. Convex lenses curve outward on at least one side, so they are thicker in the middle than on the edges. So they may appear like this, where there's just one side that's curved, or they may appear like this, where both sides are curved. But in both cases, you can clearly see that the center portion of the lens is wider than the edges. So that's what qualifies this to be a convex lens. It has a focal point and a focal length, just like a concave mirror. So concave mirrors have a focal point and a focal length. Convex lenses have a focal point and focal length. So it's important to remember the difference, right? Yeah. If the object is more than one focal length away from the lens, then the image is going to be upside down. That's the same as it was with the mirror, right? And if it's closer than one focal length, the image will be right side up. But unlike in a mirror, the image will also be larger. So convex lenses are lenses used to magnify things. If you've ever used a magnifying glass, you have used a convex lens. This is also why you have to hold a magnifying glass relatively close to the object you want to magnify, correct? In order for it to be more than, or for it to be less than a focal length from the object and make it bigger. The other type of lens is a concave lens. These lenses curve inward on at least one side, so they are thinner in the middle than they are on the edges. So you might see one that's like this, or you might see one where both sides curve in. In both cases, the center is thinner than the edges, and that's what qualifies it to be a concave lens. Like a convex mirror, a concave lens always forms an image where the image is right side up and smaller than the actual object. All right, that's our first objective done. We've described the types of images formed by lenses and mirrors. So now we're going to move on to your eye. Just like when we learned about the ear, we're going to talk about each structure in the eye from the outside of your eye in. So we're working from the most external pieces of your eye to the most internal ones, okay? Starting with the cornea. The cornea is a convex lens that's made of transparent tissue, and it's located on the outside of your eye. So it's this clear portion that's on the front of your eye, okay? So if you're touching your eye, you're more than likely touching your cornea. A lot of people know that you have a lens in your eye. Most people don't realize that you actually have 2 because your cornea is, in fact, also a lens. And they don't realize that the cornea is actually in charge of most of the bending of light. So most of the changes in the direction of light that are done when light enters your eye are done by the cornea. So your cornea bends this light in to your eye, and then your iris, which is a muscle and the colored portion of your eye, helps open and close your pupil. Your pupil is going to be this opening in your iris. It's at the center of your iris, and it opens and closes depending on light. Well, the opening opens and closes because the iris is opening and closing it. But if you're in very dim light, your iris muscle is going to relax and open that pupil way up wide to allow as much light as possible into your eye. And if you go into bright light, then your iris is going to contract and close that pupil off, so it's almost just a pinprick, and let in minimal light because there's lots of light available and you don't want to damage your eyes with it. Behind your pupil is the lens. The lens is exactly what it says it is. It is a lens made of transparent tissue, and there are muscles attached to your lens that help change the shape of your lens. And by changing the shape of the lens, they allow you to focus on objects that are far away and then also focus on objects that are close to you. So I want you to just hold your hand up in front of your face and look past it at the wall. Notice how it becomes blurry and out of focus, and then if you look in at it, it will come into focus in front of you. What's happening right there is muscles in your eye are actually changing the shape of the lens in your eye and allowing you to focus. You can also relax those muscles and allow your eyes to go out of focus. I don't know if you've ever done that, but you can do it. Okay. Next up, we have the retina. The retina is inside your eye on the very back surface of the interior of your eye, and it has a layer of special light-sensitive cells in it. The lens is going to take the light passed to it by the cornea through the iris and the pupil, and it's going to focus that light onto your retina so that the cells in your retina can then take those electrical signals can take the light and turn it into electrical signals that can then be transmitted up to your brain. Those cells are the rods. Rod cells can detect any level of light, even very, very little light, but they are unfortunately unable to detect color for you. So while they can allow you to see in the dark, that's why your night vision is largely in black and white. And then you have the cone cells, and these do allow you to see in color. What happens is you have 3 types of cone cells, and each cone cell detects different wavelengths of light. And depending on which combination of cone cells are essentially lit up or saying to the brain, hey, we detect light, then your brain can interpret different colors. Something I want to be very clear about here. Light doesn't actually have a color. Light is just energy. Our brain has developed a way to sense different levels of energy as different colors. So color doesn't actually exist. It's a construct of our brain telling us what wavelength of light is reaching us. So our brain has given us the ability to see in color, even though the light itself is not colored. Okay? All right, let's talk a little bit about color then. Now that we understand how light gets into our eyes and how our eyes detect different colors, let's talk about how each object gets its color. Because white light, or the light produced by the sun, or the light produced by these lamps in our room, contains all different wavelengths of light. There's wavelengths for red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, and violet in white light. Objects get their color based on which wavelengths of light they reflect. So, for example, if you have an object that is blue and it gets struck with white light, what's happening is that that object is absorbing or taking in all wavelengths of light except the wavelength for blue, and then it's reflecting the wavelength of light that your brain interprets as blue to your eyes. So when that wavelength hits your eyes, your brain says that object is blue. If objects emit light, then those objects will be the color of whatever light they emit. So if you have a neon lamp at home that emits purple light, it's because it's emitting the wavelength of light that your brain reads as purple. Okay? If objects reflect all light, they appear white. So tiles that appear white or even grayish are reflecting most of the light that hits them to your eyes. They're not reflecting it in a regular pattern, so you're not seeing your reflection, but they are reflecting all of it, so your brain is perceiving them as white. But what happens if we have a blue object and we shine only red light on it? So imagine we turned all the lights off in this room, and I had a red light bulb in my flashlight, and I turned it on, and I shined it at this blue wall. We know already that this blue wall does not reflect red light, right? It's going to absorb that red light. And as a result, it's going to reflect almost no light. And when objects don't reflect light, our brain perceives them as black. So, the objects in this room that your brain is perceiving as being black in color are in fact just absorbing most wavelengths of light, and therefore your brain is not detecting light coming from them and is detecting them as black. So black is just the absence of color. Okay, so we've hit all three of our objectives. We've discussed the different types of images produced by lenses and mirrors, how our eyes allow us to see, and how objects get their color. So you should be able now to do your homework. You can ask me for help if you need it.